Hey, this is Zac.
And I'm Clint, and we wanted to thank Exo-terra for sponsoring this episode of Colubrid and Colubroid Radio.
Exo-terra is the industry leader in glass terrarium enclosures, and we are a big fan of getting to see the species we work with both at home and at the university.
We utilize Exo-terra caging here at Metazotics, and in addition to top quality terrariums, Exo-terra offers an array of heating options, lighting, supplements, decor, and truthfully anything needed or wanted when keeping reptiles.
Thank you, Exo-terra, for supporting Colubrid and Colubroid Radio. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Colubrid and Colubroid Radio. Zac here, as always, with my best bud, Clint. How you doing, dude?
I'm exhausted, Zac.
Yeah.
I am so tired. I am so tired.
Yeah, we have both had. Holy crap! Has it been 96? I don't know how many hours it's been, but okay. I'm so tired I can't use words, so that's good. This is going to be a great one. It has been under a week, and in this time period, we have been to California and back because we went to Pomona. I thought that I had it rough because I started the spring semester with all that insanity, but you went and did something that's way more chaotic and stress-inducing, yet full of excitement and I don't know, potential. And we'll either get to that now or we can get to that later. It's your call.
I mean, I'll say it and then I can go into it a little more. Yeah. So, as you said, we went, both of us traveled Friday, across the country to California. And, we're going to go into, a lot more on that in a little bit. And then the weekend in California, you flew back Sunday, had to immediately start your new semester on Monday. I stayed through the entire show in California, so flew out, spent the entire day Monday traveling to get home. I got home, I think, around 10 o'clock.
Yep.
And immediately, I think I slept for a few hours, came back to the shop on Tuesday to do all the catch up. And actually today, because we're recording this on Wednesday, today is supposed to be my day off.
Yeah, you didn't take a day off.
No.
No.
Instead, I went and we purchased our second location. So, yeah, and we take it over tomorrow morning. So it was boom, and suddenly we're running two shops, kind of overnight. So it's going to be a whirlwind. But I'll tell you, we made a post about it, and it has, just the overwhelming response from the community on it. Very excited, very happy for not only us, but the individuals that we are taking the shop over from. They are a local show promoter, and this gives them the ability to just put all their attention on the shows, making them better, growing more. So I think just all in, this is going to be a great thing for our local herp community, as a whole. So exciting stuff.
Well, I'll say it. If anybody can pull this off, it's you. And if anybody should pull this off, it's Metazotics, because you guys are leading by example in the industry. And we always hear all the time about, I went to the pet shop and they came up and talked to me and they don't know anywhere near as much as I do. But I can tell you right now, if you're a Metazotics and Clint walks up to you, you got an expert there. So I'm tickled to hell and back that you all did this and are expanding. So,
I thank you so much. And I'll tell you, we've got a store full of very talented individuals and varying degrees of experience, but they learn so much so fast, and I'm really proud of the team. And that's actually to me, while we've got all the work and all the different logistics that are going to take place over really the next 6 weeks, because our plan is so the shop's only open 3 days a week right now, the one that we just took over, and we're going to leave it that way for 2 weeks. And during those 2 weeks, we're basically having a massive sale, just kind of liquidating what's in there, because a lot of it's not things that we carry, and then we're shutting it down completely. We're shutting it down for a month. We will open 1 day a week just so that community can come get feeders. We want to make sure that we can take care of the community as best we can. But during that time, we're talking new flooring, paint, and then the type of fixtures we use. And, so it's going to be a complete remodel and then a grand opening with a party. It's, kind of rebranded. But, as much work as all that is going to take, the thing that I don't know if it'll be a lot of work, but I guess the biggest focal point for me is ensuring that a second location lives up to the reputation of the first. So that we have the same vibe, the same customer experience, all the way through. And so we're looking at making sure we put in the right players, over there. One of which, Drew, my former nursery guy. He is coming back. This location is going to be a little closer to where he's going to college, so not quite as long of a drive. Works well with his schedule, and so we are going to have some of the Metazotics original team, in the new location as well, and that really makes me happy.
That's pretty wicked.
Yeah,
very cool.
He's stoked too.
Oh, well, he should be. He gets to come back, and I remember that Drew had a couple fans that asked about him. So there you go. If you're those people, Drew's back.
Drew is back.
That's fantastic. Okay, cool.
Well, how's this semester starting for you?
That's a great question. When you launch a semester at a small school, where it sounds corny, it sounds cliche, but it's also very true. The vibe at West Liberty is once the students get past that first year, really even past the first semester, you kind of have this like family vibe going on. Like they know that all the professors there are rooting for them. Not that you don't root for your students if you're at a bigger school, but you just have different priorities at a bigger school. And so I knew coming in, it was actually funny. I was in the airport flying home on Sunday, and I think due to the crazy 3-hour time change, I was trying to keep track of what time it was on the East Coast and blah, blah. And I opened up, I was sitting in the airport, and I think it was like 9:45 in California, which is 12:45 on the East Coast. And it was right when everybody was waking up and everybody realized, oh, crap, I didn't register for this class. I don't have this done. I needed this form filled out. I don't have financial aid. And it was just an email for one email a minute for 3 hours. And so I was just telling everybody, just come to the office, come to the office, come to the office. So the first day was frenetic. And then to add insult to injury, I live in Northern West Virginia, as many of you know. And here on the East Coast, we just keep getting snow. And where I'm at, you get the storms that, make it across the country. But we are just at the southern end of lake effect. So any warm air or cold air, depending on the day, goes over Lake Erie, boom, snowstorms pop up. So on top of all of this week, we've had a couple storms that have hit at really inopportune times when people are coming to school. My college is in a cow pasture, and if you're sitting there thinking it's not,
sorry, that's
it's in a cow pasture.
It's the first time you've said that.
Really? Oh yeah, totally. You'll see this year, man. We have had cows in the middle of our quad. I have walked out to go to a meeting, and there's a freaking Holstein right there, and you're like, is that real? Yep, that's definitely real. So anyway, to get to our school, you got to go on this goat path out in the middle of the sticks. And so when the snow hits, it's a big deal. Well, last night, I taught snake biology or biology of snakes. I'm teaching that class this semester, which is awesome. And the lab is a night class. And, you think you're going to be okay. And the students started coming in yesterday. Are we having lab? Are we having lab? And I was like, yeah, we'll have a lab. I don't understand why we're not going to have lab. Why? I didn't look outside. And then I got up to go get a dinner right before 5 o'clock, and it dropped like 1.5 inches of snow, and we were marooned up there. And I was just like, well, screw it. We're already up here. So we're doing lab. And so sure enough, in the midst of a blizzard, I was doing that. But yeah, no. But today, it's Wednesday. Today's the first time that just the 10-minute tasks are finally come to an end. That's fairly normal. But the other thing that's interesting is next week is every year, all the crayfish biologists, we basically parasitize a larger fisheries meeting, kind of like a tick on something. We need to all get together, but there's not enough people to have a crayfish meeting yet. So we'll find some regional fisheries meeting. And then I've actually been the guy that set up the symposiums. That's why Colubrid Fest was so straightforward for me to do with the talks, because I do this all the time. Well, somebody beat me to the punch this year. And I usually try to make that meeting hit in March. So we've got some time to get up and running the semester. Well, my Midwest friends grabbed it, and that is next week. So I, on top of all this, have to put together a 30-minute talk on one of our projects. And my grad students were going to be there. Well, now my grad students, they went because they're badasses and got jobs. So they're not going to be there. So now I'm presenting their project, which I have no business presenting, because it's all the genetics we complain about all the time with species descriptions. And so I'm getting a crash course on that. And it's really funny because the students are like, okay, it's real. Normally the relationship here is the advisor says to the student, all right, you're going to give a talk. Don't make me look dumb. But this time the relationship is student to me. Okay, you're presenting what I've spent the past 2 years of my life doing, and you have no business doing this. Don't make me look dumb. So trying to launch a semester, trying to really know the intimate details of this project, going to St. Louis next week. Oh, by the way, there's supposed to be another freaking snowstorm hit Monday. So it's just been, pure unabashed chaos. But that's why we do this show, because this is our 2 hours of Zen.
Yes, it is.
Yes. So anyway, but it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. That's what I keep telling myself.
It's good. We're good. Everything's good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's it for me. As far as animals, I don't have any updates. It is cold here. I'm actually worried about my animals in brumation because Monday and Tuesday of next week, the temperature is supposed to be -6, I think, at night here. And I was kind of doing my back of the envelope math and was like, son of a bee, it might drop below freezing in parts of my garage. So I'm going to be trying to figure out where the hell to put I think it's 80 snakes that are brumating in there to get them above that point. But then later in the week, I'm going to be in Missouri, mind you. It's supposed to then warm up. So I can't put them somewhere too high in the garage, because then they're going to get way above 50 degrees. So that's my cross to bear over the next 48 hours. But that's it for me. I don't have really anything else going on.
Nice. I don't have much in terms of animals either, other than I've got 25, 30 snakes waiting to be shipped.
Yep.
So it's, in this perpetual every Monday sending out emails. Nope, not this week. Nope, not this week. Waiting for those windows to open. That was one of the shocks, because weather was lovely for us Midwest boys when we were in California. Midwest and East Coast. So I mean, we were right at 68, and
it was great.
And we're not tiny dudes, so 68 is chef's kiss. Exactly. And then I came home, and I think we've got a group that we've been chatting in, for some of us that were attending there, and I sent a picture of the temperature, on that shows in my car whenever I landed, and I think it was 14 degrees at that point. And I should have taken the picture. The next morning it was 7 when I walked out the next morning. I'm like, oh gosh. So wake up call for sure. But that's about all I have on animals. I mean, nothing really new or, exciting, on that front, so not the time of year for it, I guess.
There we go. Only thing, I guess I have one thing. False water cobras are going to be put together at the university tomorrow, because they got their warm up. They only get a month at lower temperatures. And I know the brumation worked for them, man, because the boys, I mean, they're just doing laps around their cages. They can sense that the females are there. So I am fairly certain that this is going to be a successful year for them. So anyway. Okay. So moving on, we have the market update. And, well, no, we don't. We have something else.
Yes.
Way important to talk about.
Yes. Before we do that, we did announce this on our Facebook page on Sunday morning, this past Sunday morning, while still in Pomona. I got a phone call in which I got to celebrate, and, you know, everyone got to hear some colorful words fly out of my mouth, but all positive. And that is that Colubrid Fest dates have been locked in. So we have Colubrid Fest is going to be September 12th through 14th at the Allen County Coliseum in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So the same venue we'd mentioned before. We just had to switch to a different weekend. Mickey got that locked in. And then it was funny because I said, okay, fantastic. You know, Zach and I will jump on and we'll start getting hotel blocks. And 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, Mickey calls me back and says, I don't think you need to do that. I'm like, well, why not? And he says, so the venue is realizing how big of an event this is about to be. And that is a national draw. In fact, international to a degree already.
People coming from across the pond.
Yeah. And because of that, the sales manager of the venue says, let me handle it. I'm going to contact the Chamber of Commerce and let them get hotel blocks worked out for you guys. So it's, I mean, you want to talk about really going to, you know, a change of venue to where we're fully supported. And I think this is going to be great for everyone. So the hotel blocks are being worked on. And I'll tell you guys, if you're listening to this, you've got 3 places that you can continue to look at and check. Colubrid and ColubridRadio.com. We will have everything updated on the Colubrid Fest section with dates, with times. Basically, as new information comes available, that piece will be updated. So if you look at it one day, check it again a week later. If there's new information, it will be on there. You can also go to the Show Me Reptiles, showmereptile.com. I'm sorry, showmereptiles.com. That is the Show Me Show website, and type in Colubrid Fest in their search bar. It'll take you right to their page. Or if you're on Facebook, go to the official Colubrid Fest group, because we do a lot of kind of real-time updates, you know, right there. And you'll see where people are asking questions. So if you have a question, there's a good chance it's probably been asked on one of those updates. But it is a go, and it is going to be something. I mean, we have so much interest in this. We have there are vendors. You know, we've said it several times in the past few episodes, but John Lasseter, he hasn't vended a show in 16 years, he said. And
he's coming to ours.
He's doing this one. He's vending ours. I mean, you know, it's exciting to think of the diversity that is going to come in. And I mean, we'll even talk about vendors from the West Coast in a moment. So I'm super pumped, super excited, and glad that, hey, look at this. We're actually getting to share it 9 months early instead of 3, right? So keep an eye out and book your tickets. If you are, I said this in a post. If you are looking to vend, one thing that you will need to do in order to vend Colubrid Fest is you will need to sign up for a vendor account on the Show Me Reptiles page. It's no charge. So go there, and you have to do that if you're going to vend at any Show Me show.
Yeah.
So that's something you can go ahead and knock out now. So if you have any hiccups, bumps, or if you have an AOL email like the Zirkles that gave this system hell, you know, you can get that figured out now. That way it's going to be smooth sailing when it comes time to just click, 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 sign up and become a vendor.
Very cool. And on the talk side, the announcement went up, and I had even more people reach out about presentations. We already have, I would say 50%, 60% of the lineup kind of figured out, but there's still some openings. We're not necessarily looking for names of speakers, but what we're definitely looking for are subjects. So if there's a particular subject that you think would be a good talk, by all means, message the Facebook account, or reach out to Clint or I. Also reach out to Max. If you're on Discord, Max dwells in Discord all the time. Reach out to Max there as well. But we once again, community. We want to make sure that the topics that we're choosing aren't necessarily what Zac and Clint and Max want to hear, but rather what you all want. But we'll talk about the presentations at a later point in time. The other goal is to get that figured out, locked in, and out to you all for consumption within the next 2 months, if not sooner. So that's the deal on the presentation piece. But yeah, no, I'm excited. It's really funny for me anyway. It's 8 minutes longer to drive to Fort Wayne than it is to Indianapolis. So, I mean, I think I can handle that. And that basically also means if you're coming from the East Coast on I-70, you have to go through Wheeling. So I'm going to let you know right now, if it's only 8 minutes longer for me, it's also only 8 minutes longer for you. So if you're in the Philly, Baltimore, DC, Pittsburgh area, kind of heading into Fort Wayne, it's really not that much farther at all than the drive you did last year, or the drive to Indianapolis. So at least that's a definite good thing. Okay. I think we did Colubrid Fest justice. We've been waiting a while. When we did this the first go around, I think we had like this announcement was when we were at IHS, and that was in June. So we're way ahead in 2025.
Well, and the other piece to that is we are now locked in with this venue for the last weekend of September every year going forward.
Yeah. Yep. So. Yep. Okay. All right. Am I doing science update or are you doing market update?
Let's go to science.
Okay. So we're going to do the science update now. Science update is brought to us by Rare Genetics, Inc. As always, this is my plug for you to take your shed skins and send them to them so they can develop their tests for us and the Colubrid community. So please do that. If you have a species of snake that you need sexed and you want definitive sexing, and the species we're talking about tonight, this is probably like the only way to do this definitively when they're at least a juvenile. Send those. You can do this through RGI, and soon we'll be able to identify SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms. I believe that's what they do, that are allied to a particular morph. So you'll be able to have a certified morph when you sell it, which is a pretty big deal when there's a lot of morphs out there where we're just kind of looking at them and saying they're so. It's another thing to be able to genetically say they are so. So that's all pretty big deal. I've been on a kick lately with the science update. Go ahead.
One sec before we move past RGI, I do want to let you know that we had a brief conversation with Kayla from RGI, and while we can't say what, we can say that sometime very soon, Ben should be on the show to update us with some cool stuff.
Yes, definitely cool for that. And we also are going to, we have every intention of having Ben on as a guest to talk about some genetic not concerns, just some genetic concepts. That was the word I was looking for. That might be misinterpreted by the herpetocultural community, which I'm really excited about that when we have that.
Yeah, me too.
Yep. Okay. But anywho, back to science update. So with science update, I've been kind of covering larger published works that you can kind of get your hands on and learn a thing or two from versus the journal article approach. And I'm doing this. If you like this, let me know. If you don't like this and you want to go back to journals, let me know. We're certainly going to be doing journals. I'm teaching biology of snakes. I am reading so many journal articles right now for my lectures. It's ridiculous. I'm doing the origin of snakes. And I think I had in my folder to make the PowerPoint for origin of snakes, I'm up to 27 papers. So I've got the papers, trust me. And a couple of those are going to be the science updates because they were super cool. But I did the hognose snake monograph, and people emailed me and said, can I have a copy of that? And I was telling Clint before the show, now I'm getting like 2, 3, 4 weeks later, I read that whole thing. It was great. This part was my favorite part, and that's super cool. I did Mark O'Shea's Snakes of the World, A Guide to Every Family, and I had about 10 people reach out to me and say, bought the book. And I was like, okay, so if I'm having that influence on people, we're going to go full nerd now. And so the book today, this is one of my absolute favorites. Okay. This is Henry Fitch. I've talked about Fitch. He's one of my heroes. Fitch basically lived on a nature sanctuary for the University of Kansas. It's now called the Fitch Natural History Preserve or something to that effect. But he would go out, set up drift fences, catch snakes, mark snakes, weigh snakes, measure snakes, make snakes puke, document where the snakes were, and then let them go. And then the next day he would wake up and do it again. And the next day he would wake up and do it again. He had 31,000 captures. Wow. And rather than 31,000 snake captures. And he wrote some independent papers. But what he did with this book, this was kind of his like magnum opus when he retired. And he basically just talked about the basic natural history of a ton of snakes that you all know and love. And on the back, right? By the way, look at this garter snake. This garter snake is insane. Like, anywho, but you can see species of study. So, species that are covered in this: copperhead, worm snake, black racer, rattlesnakes, ringneck snakes, Great Plains rat snakes, black rat snakes, mole king snakes, speckled kings, red milks, common water snakes, bull snakes, brown snakes, ringneck snakes, Tentella gracilis, I don't know the common name for that one, garter snakes, line snakes, and Virginia, the earth snakes. Okay. And basically, this is chocked full of the kind of information that we as herpetoculturalists want to know for those species. It talks about when he saw them gravid, and then how long they were gravid, and then how many eggs they laid, and then where the eggs were laid, and how big the babies were when they hatched. And then because he caught them, so many of each species, he was able to make these hypothesized growth charts where basically a bull snake should be this big at 1 year, this big at 2 years, this big at 3 years. And then for king snakes, they should be this big at 1 year, this big at 2 years, this big at 3 years. Talks about the habitats he found it in, talks about the plants he found it in. Everything that he got one of these little buddies to puke up, he documented. So you can see the diet of the animals in nature. Like the rat snakes are really interesting because he talks about how there were a bunch of voles and there were some birds, which I thought was really kind of cool, not just birds. So this book, invaluable. Now, it came out when I was in college, late 90s, early 2000s, and I asked my mother to buy this for me for Christmas. She was an English teacher, so asking an English teacher parent to buy you a book, you're going to get the book. That's pretty much how it works. So anywho, and I distinctly remember when she bought it way back when it came out. It was a Krieger publication, if you know that publishing company. They've now been bought out. This thing was like $70 back then, which probably would put it above $100 today with inflation. But you can get this book. Go ahead and throw that up there, Max. For, I believe it is $20. And if you're on YouTube, you can see where you can go and get it brand new. Eagle Mountain Publishing, if you're listening to this on the phone. I can't recommend this book enough. This is just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful book. I've used this book, and this is another thing, and then I'll stop talking. The work we're doing in Iowa being funded by the CCR Conservation Corps, by Colubrid Fest, by those of you who choose to give towards the conservation efforts and the research that I'm doing at West Liberty. I'm in a wonderful position professionally where I've got tenure. I'm the department head. I can decide what we're doing with our, research efforts. And my goal is to basically try to do something similar to this by studying those snakes that are in Iowa over the next decade. Okay. Now, Fitch had I don't know, I think he had 30 to 40 years on me. But they also, in the Iowa site, are catching quite a few snakes. And we have modern technology, but I'm using this book is the total inspiration. It's the basis to what we're going to be doing with the work we're doing with blue racers and eastern garter snakes and western ribbon snakes and bull snakes, fox snakes, all the goodies. And of course, the hognose snakes. Can't leave them out. But it's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful book. If you like North American snake natural history, just buy it. Just buy it. That's all I'm going to say. Okay. So, that's mine.
And I will tell anyone who is listening to this and couldn't watch all that, if you couldn't hear how much Zac likes this book, he was clutching that book to his chest like it was a toddler.
Yes.
The entire time he's given that information. So it is obvious how dear that book is to you, my friend.
I held it to my bosom like a baby.
You did. You did.
Yep. I love that book. Okay.
I'm going to get it. You sold me. I'm going to get it.
Cool.
All right. So we'll move to the market update. And the market update, as always, is sponsored by the Show Me Reptile Show and the Show Me Marketplace. And if you do sign up on the Show Me Marketplace and use coupon code CCR-50, it will give you 50% off of your first year for the Show Me Marketplace. So hop on, give it a shot, help grow that platform, and sell some animals. Make that happen.
Do it.
So what I'm going to do with this market update is, rather than I will, before I step into that, I will give a little bit of not necessarily numbers, but things have slowed. Things have slowed. And it's part of it, I would say, it may be more micro than macro. I've had a decent amount of online activity, whether that is snakes being sold or even inquiries. I've had a lot here lately. And like I said, I've got about somewhere between 25 and 30 snakes waiting to ship out. But locally, man, it's slowed down. And of course, we've been hit with 2 winter storms, and it's still cold, but I'm going to be interested to see what this weekend does, because we expected a big influx for feeders, because we haven't seen a lot over the past 2 weeks. And and it's a bi-weekly cycle. You'll see it go real big, and then the next week it'll be a little lower, then real big, then a little lower. Gotcha. But it hasn't done that in the past few weeks. But that may come this weekend. That the pent up demand may take place then. But I will say, we're in that January lull where, you have, I don't like to say right after Christmas, because generally that last week of the year, there's Christmas money, Christmas gift cards and all that still gets spent. So that can be a decent time. But so far in January, been real slow, and I expect / hope to see that change, by February. I know it will once tax checks hit, but I'm a little surprised, in the past few days, what I've seen. Ouch. Not real encouraging with what I just did, So I'm like, come on, guys. But that is what I'm seeing. I will say the shows, because there was the Evansville and the Indianapolis shows, both took place over the last 2 weeks. And I'll give kudos to Anna and to Ox. They did both of those shows for me. The Indianapolis show was while we were in California. Yeah. And while they weren't phenomenal as far as financial results, they did well for this time of year, and so I was pretty happy there. But so I'd say kind of all across the board, it's going to be fairly mediocre to the low end for the next few weeks. For the rest of the market update, what I want to do is this was a huge opportunity for me as someone who likes to see, you know, the market, getting to compare the largest, you know, show on the West Coast there, or one of the largest, I guess. I believe it's the biggest. But comparing that to the Midwest shows, to Tinley, you know, to what we see, you know, from one to the other. And it's actually really neat. There were some pretty big differences. Now, as I go through these observations, I'm not saying either is better, worse. These are just differences I noticed. Some I liked, some I didn't, just differences. The show that I would have to compare Pomona to would be Tinley, obviously, because of just the sheer size, you know, of these locations. The Pomona show is in a bigger venue for sure. And while I don't know, there's probably the same amount of tables as Tinley, or it's close. Tinley's just in a smaller venue. So as far as actual vendors, they're probably about the same. Again, could be wrong, but I don't think I am on that. The mix. So, in a given, this is the only West Coast show I have ever been to. It's a January show, not a spring show. So, you know, take this for what it is, and understand that my data collection here is small. However, some of the noticeable difference inside the show, you had on the West Coast, there's definitely more diversity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. More species diversity.
You say one thing real quick and let you rip.
Yeah, have at it.
Someone who loves diversity, and there were plenty of ball pythons, there were plenty of crested geckos, there were plenty of leopard geckos. But the level of diversity to me was so shocking that I don't remember seeing the ball pythons and the ciliatus, the cresteds and everything. I remember all the other things I saw.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And I haven't had that feeling with the couple of Tinleys I've gone to or some of the other shows I've been to in a very long time.
Yeah. It's definitely more diversity out there. And I would say definitely fewer ball pythons.
Yes.
You know, we're talking the Tinley show, and even the regional shows are heavy ball pythons out here. And Pomona was, you know, ball pythons were the most common thing for sure, but not to the degree that I see in the Midwest. Not at all. Not at all.
I second that.
The Colubrid presence was certainly heavier in Pomona than what I see at Tinley or regional shows out here. And the funny thing is everything else in California is more expensive. I paid $8 for a corn dog, and it wasn't even a big one.
It wasn't a Midwest corn dog.
No, it wasn't.
He was real upset about the corn dog.
Yes. I'm still bitter about that damn corn dog. So, so everything else is more expensive, but actually Colubrid pricing was lower. It was anywhere between 10 to 25% lower on almost everything I saw than what I see in the Midwest. Now, there is a caveat to that. So the bulk of what I saw on the Colubrids, you had your hognose, you had your corns. Hognose were definitely, I mean, if they're 36% of the market, the Colubrid market, they were every bit of 40 to 45% of the Colubrids there. No doubt about it. I mean, there were a lot. And a lot of diversity within them. You know, that was for
I enjoyed it.
Oh yeah. So you had those two species, and then the bulk of what I would see would be Pitiophis, which you don't see nearly to that degree out here, or the range of what we saw out there. And other, what I would say, kind of west and southwest species. So you would have, different pituophis. You would have different California species that, if there were species they could work with there, Texas, Arizona, things around there. And then it would make sense why the prices were a little lower, because it's where, a lot of these species originated. And it's also because several vendors would be working with them, then naturally the prices would come down the way that the market does. So that was interesting. I did not see nearly the Asian rat snake presence that I expected. Not at all. I really thought that was going to be heavier. And again, I understand that, maybe a later show there would be. I understand there was individuals told me there was a certain vendor that, is there frequently, and they usually would have a lot, and they happen to not be at this show. But, all in, that surprised me. It was definitely more of a Southwest species, out there than Asians. And then I thought, why the hell do I see more Asians in the Midwest than California? Yeah. And then it dawned on me, you've got me, you've got Matt Most, you've got Rob Zirkle, all living within 8 hours of each other.
Yeah.
There's no wonder, that there's more, more Asian species in this Midwest area, because it's not only, we sell a bunch here, but no, we all love them so much. People who are around us get interested in them, and it's kind of expanded. And don't get me wrong, it's not flooded with Asian species in our area. I just see more of them even at a regional show than what I saw at Pomona.
Yeah. Well, one observation I had, being the false water cobra guy, there were a ton.
Yeah, there was
water cobras.
in
that show. And to give this perspective, if you're a California person, there's falsies on the East Coast, don't get me wrong, but there were like a couple hundred false water cobras in there. And normally for a larger show, you're lucky if you got 20. Like, in places like Tinley, you can't have them because they're rear fangs, so they don't show up there. But I was kind of blown away by the number of false water cobras. And what also was pretty fun is when I was walking around and I was like, look down at these false water cobras. And there were 3 different times when we were like zipping around, leaving the table to go get lunch, or leaving the table to go bathroom, whatever. And then you'd take a long loop back to get to the table. I'd glance down, see, a false water cobra, and then do a triple take. Cause I'm like, that's one of mine. Like, is that one of mine? And then I'd look up and it was the East Bay Vivarium. Yep, that's definitely one of mine. So it was kind of cool to actually see the lines that I'm working with and developing are actually like out there. So, and I've shipped a lot of them out west, so I know, that's the case. But that was a little bit mind blowing to me, to see the volume of that species at Pomona was kind of telling, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. There was, so from a vendor standpoint, there was something I didn't like about Pomona, and I mentioned it while I was there, and it was the table layout. So the table layout were, I believe it was 8 tables in a square, if I'm remembering correctly. And what I mean by that is, if you think 1, 2, and then turn 3, 4, turn 1. And so the venue it was either 4, I think it was 4 squares wide. So, 4 sets of 8 table squares wide. Yes. And then you have your perimeter. And as you walked in, so you've got the 4, and it just kept going back. So you'd have, more and more.
It was islands.
Yes.
Yeah.
I did not like that.
Well, it was really hard to keep track of what you'd seen and what you hadn't seen.
100%. And it did prevent a lot of congestion. Because that's one thing at Tinley, I'll tell you, we have congestion when it's busy. And I think on Saturday, they put over 15,000 people through the door in Pomona. I think it was closer to 17. So I mean, there's a lot of traffic, and it didn't get as packed ever as what I feel in Tinley. However, as a buyer, other than having to navigate the traffic, the Tinley tables tend to be easier to shop because, like you said, you have a clear up and down path, that you're taking through Tinley, where at Pomona, it was real difficult for me to remember where something was, or if I'd even made my way around each, of the islands. And if you were on a back table from the front door, then it was real easy for you to get missed completely and not seen. So that was one piece that I will say I did prefer, over Tinley, although it was nice to never have to wait 5 people deep to get to a table.
You didn't have to throw a shoulder to go pee.
Right. So, that bigger venue, it was definitely nice. Now, and another piece I would say, the 2 venues, there's a different feel. And I talked about this, I think, on the ride to the airport. So you have the Tinley venue's a nicer venue.
Yeah.
Because it's a hotel convention center, Pomona show's not. But obviously the Pomona show is able to grow, because of how big it is. And that's awesome. That's what you want. But I also got to thinking, because it does feel, even a lot of the displays from the vendors are bigger and just, more pow at Tinley than what I noticed at Pomona. And then it kind of hit me. I think it's because so much of the vending in Tinley is big ball python breeders.
Yeah.
There's that big
gecko breeders.
Yeah. And so it's big money being thrown into their presentations. And, where I will say Pomona felt like a really, really big, nice regional show.
Yeah.
Like
I actually like that vibe.
Me too.
So much more.
I did too.
I mean, truth be told, shocker with the nerd element of the podcast here, I don't really like the over commercialization element of like everybody's got a matching uniform and we got like the freaking boom box going in the background and like what the hell is that? No. I like walking up and just knowing, okay, this guy's passionate about what he's doing and he's bred these snakes in his garage and let's take a look at them. Or, this couple's done the same, like that vibe. Definitely more present at Pomona than Tinley. And that was, I think, why I can say that I liked Pomona more than Tinley, because it was just like, I just felt like it was all the listeners that listened to us and us had a big platform, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely, more of a down-to-earth feel and vibe. And, really, really cool show, all the way around. It's
super impressed.
I can tell you that personally, after seeing what I saw with the Colubrids, the next time I'm in Pomona, I don't plan on buying a business the next week. So
don't do that.
I'm going to take money and I plan on, I did make a purchase. I broke down finally, because again, some of the deals I couldn't pass. I did pick up 3 more locality alterna. So could not resist. Pick those up, and they're beautiful. Get those.
I did some purchase. I purchased a boa sigma from Glenn Brooks Reptiles beforehand, and our guest tonight, I'm going to thank her right now. Thank you, Kayla, for harboring the boa until it warms up, which unfortunately might be in May. I don't know when the hell this weather's going to break. And then the thing that was super dangerous this was dangerous because I am doing this cutting back on the Kings, and I'm really going to give Pitch Ophis a go because they're my favorite. And as we said, the pits were freaking everywhere. And and then they were relatively inexpensive compared to what they are on like Morph Market, which is really the only venue us East Coasters really have. Other than a couple dedicated breeders that are over here. And so it was very difficult for me to be responsible. And I was responsible. Amen. I only had 2 pickups. And I actually made the deal before I went out. And Envy Reptiles Oh my God. No. Why can I not remember NV Reptiles? I see him. Jason. Jesus. Yeah. I've been trying to get Great Basin gopher snakes because that's just a subspecies I want. Deserticola. And he had blondes. And so I was like, okay, I'm getting those. So those are coming here once the polar vortex dies and we can get a shipping window. Nice. But the two Great Basins and the boa are those are my pickups, and I'm very proud of myself. Now, I told everybody there, if I lived in California, I would have gone home with about 18 beaded lizards. Because that I have the Gilas. I love the Gilas. So I'm glad. Yeah, my wife's glad that it was in California. We'll just leave it at that. So
yeah, it's so great. And I mean, we for the podcast, I want to talk about this.
Heck yeah.
So, we want to thank the Patreon listener. We want to thank everybody for all of your support. But we'd like to point out the reason that we were able to go out there was because of the Patreon subscribers, as well as the show sponsors that funded this trip. And we wanted to make sure that we were able to better the podcast from the trip. It's not just us getting to go out and play and have a good time. And so I think we have lined up 6 or 7 new guests, 7 new guests from this show. One of which I got to go ahead and say it because I came over like fanboying out. Yes. I'm staring at Zac like through the crowd, and he sees.
Can I tell the truth? And I hope this isn't offensive to people.
Go ahead.
The way you came in to the table, like a literal deranged 10-year-old boy. Okay, I thought one of two things, because the bathroom was on the other side of our table, and I thought he either has some really good news, or he's been fighting this crowd and he's about to explode his pants. Like it's either one or the other. And then you came in and then you were waving the book I'm sure you're going to talk about. And I was like, all right.
Absolutely. Yeah. So one of the breeders that we got to meet there was Bob Applegate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was, so I got his book, had him sign it, talked to him, explained who we are, what we do. Asked if he would be interested in coming on the show. His first response was, well, if you just want to come over to the house and have a beer, we can talk about like, oh, I'd love to. I can't, but that would be awesome. But when you think about it, there's a lot of names that can be thrown around as, super influential in building herpetoculture, from the beginning and the groundwork laid. But there's kind of 2 names that you learn early, you hear, and that's Trumbauer and Applegate.
Yep.
And, we had Craig. Bob has agreed to come on. So super excited to have him on and get to pick his brain and hear those stories. So that was, I couldn't wait to come over and tell Zac, guess who I met? Guess who's coming on the show? So
and then I promptly bolted right out from the table immediately. I think it was there for a minute and a half. And then the other thing that's really funny, so there's going to be people from California listening to this, and they're going to be like, but it's Bob. And why are we saying that? Because we're like losing our mind, and our California friends are like, oh yeah, you met Bob? And we're like, yeah, we met Jesus. What the hell are you talking about? Why aren't you more excited? Bob Applegate enclosures. Like we've talked about those on like at least 5 episodes, I think. So yeah,
I have an Applegate special, pyro right back here.
Yeah.
It's yes. So, I mean, that was so neat. And then the author of the Gray Band King Snake book and co-author on the Rosie Boa book. Is it George Merker?
Merker.
I've got the book over here. And obviously, with as much as I've gotten into Alterna,
that's right? It is Merker.
Okay.
Yes.
So as much as I've gotten into Alterna over the past, couple years now, getting to meet him was awesome. And he's coming on the show. That's fantastic. And there's a few others too. And forgive me if I can't remember everybody at the moment. Quick sidetrack. We were talking about species we saw. I have never seen so many Rosie boas in my life.
Yes. I actually got to see adult Rosie boas.
Yes.
we don't ever see adults at our shows over here. It's always the little worms.
Yeah, and if you see them at all,
Yeah.
sand boas all the time. Rosie's, And so I'm like, I need your card. So take that. But yeah, that was fantastic. We also locked in several West Coast breeders for Colubrid Fest.
Yes, we did.
We already have several that are coming back, but Glenn, he's going to be coming. I met an awesome guy from Arizona, Scott Potts, and I loved what he had on his table. He's wanting to come. One of the big ones. Probably just I was just I'm honored is what I would say. I'm honored by this one, but John Michaels, Black Pearl.
Black Pearl. I want y'all to think about that.
John does 2 shows a year, both in California, and he's actually excited to come do Colubrid Fest. So we will have Indigos in Indiana.
There you go.
And that's just fantastic. So, and there's others. I mean, there are several others. So it's going to be good stuff. I mean, this trip was good for the podcast. It was good for Colubrid Fest, and just the connections made are going to help us bring more content, bring more stuff for everybody. So thank you for allowing us to go do this, and thank you to our friends that invited us out and made this happen. You guys know who you are. You're awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. So after all of that, I think it's ready. We're ready to bring on our guest tonight.
Let's do it.
All right, cool. So our guest tonight is a return guest. We've only had one other return guest. And that was for our 50th episode with Owen. So this go around, we have Kayla Martin of Infrared Reptiles. Kayla was at Colubrid Fest and was one of our panelists there. And when she was on initially, we had her on talking about Honduran milk snakes. And that's all, that's wonderful. But Kayla also does oddballs. And, we love oddballs. And I love the episodes where we go deep on a single species. And the species we'll be talking about tonight, after we're going to have Kayla introduce the oddball species she takes care of and breeds. But I want to say, as a guy who teaches herpetoculture, as a guy who has a lab for herpetoculture, IHS guy, I always have mad respect for people who do something for the first time, or are someone who's at least in the club of this hasn't been done more than half a dozen times. And based off the data we have at hand, we're pretty positive that Kayla is one of the very few, if not the only person, to breed our focal species tonight, which is Egyptian False Cobras. And I have to be careful. I'm telling the listeners right now, and everybody, and Clint and Kayla, I am going to call these things false water cobras at least twice tonight, just so you know. I've done it all day today when the students were asking what's the topic tonight. But anywho, but yeah, we're going to talk about these snakes. These snakes are fantastic. If you like snakes that are active and do crazy things, this is a species you might be interested in. But I'm going to say this right off the bat. This is also a rear fang taxa that is one of the hottest rear fangs that you can find. So, before you listen to this, we know that we are the gateway drug for many of the species that we do interviews for. Really think it over long and hard if this is a taxa that you decide you want to go for, because as you're about to learn from Kayla, who's doing an excellent job with them, they definitely require some specific types, specific husbandry, specific care, and it's a little bit, it's definitely unique to them. So with that crazy long introduction, Kayla, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm tired.
Yeah.
I feel like my brain is kind of in a fog from this weekend. I have not recovered yet. I've been just go since the second I got home.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yes. And Kayla was at Pomona. So with that being said, before we jump into the false, we're just going to call them false cobras tonight. Could you just tell the guests, we did your intro with the first episode. So if you want to learn the intro for Kayla, go there to the Honduran episode. But would you mind discussing your oddball collection specifically and how it came to be and why you keep the species that you keep?
Yeah. Well, actually, side note. My first episode was January last year, and it's again January this year.
There you go.
And actually, and if we count the Colubrid Fest recap, you're our first three-peat.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
I'm honored.
Yeah, first three-peat right here. So,
I like weird, messed up face snakes. So if they've got that rostral scale, then I think they're cool looking. And that's so it's like I started with the oddball stuff, pretty early. And that was, dipped my toes in the Madagascar hognoses. So way back when, I think when I started the oddball stuff, it was like 2008, 2009. Had all three Mad Hogs for several years, and now I'm working with them again. And then the False Cobras. Most of my oddball stuff is African. With no rhyme or reason. It wasn't anything I was like, oh, I want African species. It just kind of happened that way. Got the African Files, African Mole, African Shovel Nose, Madagascar Cat Eye, all three Madagascar Hognoses. So what else? And then it goes into I got Barron's Racers and the Goniosoma prasinum, kukri snakes, black-headed spotted whip snakes. That was my Colubrid Fest.
I was going to say, got those at Colubrid Fest, right?
Yeah. Those are awesome. The blotched diadem. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly.
That's right.
Diadem snakes. Think that's it.
Yeah. So
that's a really cool mix. I mean, and whenever you pointed out that you have several that are African species, as soon as you said that, I got to thinking, I'm like, and that's an area we don't see a whole lot.
Yeah. No.
Whenever someone has the less common, it ends up being an Asian species or a South American species for the most part, or at least in the circles that I'm usually involved in. And so, as you're saying that, I'm like, yeah, hell yeah, African stuff. It's you just don't have as many people working with things, at least not that I'm fully aware of. So pretty cool.
Yeah, and it seems shockingly organized, but it's totally serendipitous.
Yep.
Which is in itself very interesting. Because in a lot of these species, there's not that many people working with them. I know people talk about the African mole snakes quite a bit, but when you actually look at the number of people working with that particular genus, it's not really that many. I know a lot of people who have had one, or they got them back in the 90s or early 2000s when they were being imported more often, but now they're pretty cool.
Apparently those are hard to breed and then hard to start. So there's a couple factors on why you're not seeing them in the industry as often as you'd like.
Yes. Okay. So with that being said, before we're going to jump into the false cobra discussion now, but I want to just take a brief moment to just talk a little bit about the genus that these guys belong to. So the genus they're in, and I am sorry if you are from Europe and you hear me say this genera name and I butcher it. Anytime there's two nouns divided by a consonant, I'm going to stutter it with my hillbilly speak. But Malpolon, I think I'm saying that right. Even if I'm not saying it right, I don't care. This genus of snakes is utterly fantastic. First and foremost, they're more closely related to freaking elapids than they are to colubrids, which is kind of fun. Second, they all are rear-fanged to some degree. The fang itself is not in the very back part of the jaw like a lot of rear-fang snakes. It's actually closer to the eyeball, and many of them, it's directly under the eyeball, which basically means if you get bit by one of these things, we always talk about how they have to chew, and they certainly have to chew, but your likelihood of getting envenomated by one of these is much higher than something like a hognose snake or a water cobra, because they have the true opistoglyphus condition where the teeth are way back in the back. And then one member of this genus, the Montpellier snake, If you really want to just go down a rabbit hole and not come out of it for a while about how badass snake behavioral ecology can be, the Montpellier snakes have been studied in France and various parts of Europe. They pair bond, so they'll basically go across the landscape as a male-female pair. There's evidence of that. There's evidence of the males actually gathering food and bringing it to females in the courting process. That's things birds and mammals do. That's not something reptiles are known for doing. And these guys,
things we do.
Yeah, that's things we do. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And they also have a home range, and the males, they do the inter male to male combat for females, but there's also some evidence that these guys might actually have a territory they defend from other male snakes. And usually it's just simply boy snake finds boy snake, and then they start combating. It's kind of rare to see some evidence of perimeter defense. Now, some of this is all hypothetical. It's hypothesized. Some observations have been made, but even then, the mere fact that these things do that. So it's not shocking to me that false cobras, people that want to keep false cobras, normally, if they've done their research, and I know this is something Kayla's into, this is a species that you're going to keep in naturalistic conditions because you want to see all of the behaviors. And I haven't talked about the behaviors they do because I'm going to let you do that. Because these snakes do stuff. These are not sit in the corner ambush predators. These are pursuit predators that, when are kept the proper way, are insanely interesting animals. So that's my introduction to them. Anyway, I hope I did them justice. So with that being said, why did you want these? And what was your driver to go and get yourself a pair? And then how many did you get? And just kind of tell the origin story.
Yeah.
So when I first found out that they even existed was early on. It was in the kingsnake.com forum days. And I don't remember what I was reading, but at some point I wrote it down on a piece of paper on top 5 species that I want to work with someday, and filed it away. And then 20 years later, found that piece of paper. And I'm like, oh yeah. And so
that's pretty awesome.
I revisited that. And I'm glad that I took the plunge now rather than then, because then would have been an epic failure. I was so not prepared for these. But so I got in, I think 6, and they were fresh wild caughts. You're gonna lose some. They, from the being caught and then all the way, the process of how many hands it goes through to get to you, they are prone to getting gland infections from being kept too cold. There's a number of things that just kind of sets them back. So I did lose. I lost quite a few. And I think I started with 6, and now I'm down to 2. One was by my choice. I ended up selling it off because the size difference was too small compared to my main pair. So I have just my male female pair now, and
Gotcha.
And I want to add more because I love them and I'd like to hoard them, but but they do require a lot of space, and I'm not in the position to set up a whole new quarantine ginormous enclosure. So I'm holding off, and I'll just raise up my babies.
There we go.
So I'm curious, before we move on, can you remember anything else that was on that piece of paper?
No.
Oh, I was just curious what, what Kayla 15, 20 years ago was into that. Was,
so the beaked snakes, which I've had multiple times since then. But no, there were some other things that I'm like, I don't recall.
I still
now
impressed.
I'm curious. I'm going to go find that paper.
I mean, it was pretty cool. It came around, you made it happen.
Yep.
Awesome. So you mentioned real quick, and I know we'll go into care, them coming in with some, gland problems from being kept too cold. And that's probably the most common mistake that people make with this species, isn't it? As far as not keeping them hot enough because they want it blazing.
Yeah. And it's not getting the proper temperatures, but not setting them up where you can achieve those temperatures. You can't do it in a rack, and most people want to quarantine in sterile environments in a rack, and it's not a species that you can do that with. So I set them up right away in a big naturalistic enclosure, and they don't come in with a heavy parasite load usually, but I mean, they're African, so they'll have something. And the heat I offer in my enclosure, it usually doesn't dip, the ambient doesn't dip below 90, like 86 to 90 or so. I have 3 different basking surfaces. On the cooler side, it basks at like 95 or so, and it depends on the room temperature. In the summer, my house gets really hot, so everything's going to be warmer than what it would be right now. And then on the warm side of the enclosure, I have two more bulbs. One sits at like 110, 115, and then another at 125, and they use it absolutely, and they need that heat, and they're active because of it. And I feel if they are lazy and they're not doing anything, or they're handleable and they're not trying to eat you, then they're too cold.
Very cool, because these are desert animals. Like they're out in the Middle East doing what lots of snakes don't do, in that they're active during the day, which is a very interesting thing to me. Biologically, I've always kind of thought of them more like a lizard than a snake, because of the fact that they're able to tolerate these temperatures. They actually seek out these temperatures, and they need these temperatures. And most of the time, if your ambient's 90 and you got a 125 degree hot spot, if you do that with like an Eastern king snake, it's dead.
Yeah,
it's not going to be with us after 2 or 3 days. And for these guys, if you don't do that, you're not doing them any justice, which is just crazy.
Yeah, hot and dry. I've never seen them drink water ever. And I have a dish in there because why not? Just in case. But they've never even gone near it.
Okay. So obviously you got the 125 spot, the 110 spot, then the other temp. But there are places where these animals can dig and get into crevices and drop down below 90.
Yeah. There's a temperature gradient in there for sure. They have dens under rocks that are nice and cool under there. They can get down in the sand, and there's the cool side of the enclosure. But even when my female laid her eggs, she laid it in the warm side.
That's incredible.
That's I think it's hard for us over here to kind of fathom that, because it's funny, even especially if we've been doing it for so long, we get in this thought process just of North American colubrids. So even when you first start keeping an Asian species, it's hard to wrap your mind around, don't put heat on it. It's no, it's got to be 80 to 82 degrees on the warm spot. That's how you take care of everything, right? And so this is just on the other end of the spectrum, where it's like, whoa, no, you're going to cook it. No, that's exactly where it wants to be. It's so that's neat. Which direction do we want to go first? Because I can tell you, while I want to hear the steps on how you take care of it and how you breed it. Also, I'm a behaviors guy. I want to hear these behaviors so badly.
I say we do the behaviors, but before we do that, just since we've talked about light and heat, UVB. Let's do UVB.
Perfect. So good point.
Do these animals, do you have them on UVB? Do you not have UVB? And if
I
you do have UVB,
them on. Yeah, I do have them on UVB. I have the Arcadia, whatever the desert one is. So the 12%, high level. Yeah, and their cage, so their enclosure is 6 by 3 by 18 tall. So it's not terribly tall. And I have the desert one inside. So I mean, they're getting a lot of UV due to the distance and the high level bulb. And they utilize it. And they'll go eat and there's like branches underneath the bulb, and they'll go bask under the UV before they'll head over and bask under the heat.
Very cool.
They absolutely use the UV.
Okay.
That's a species that I'm not in the least bit surprised.
No, they're out in the desert.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just they're a desert species, but they're actually out during the day.
Yeah, sure.
Soaking it up. So yeah, that makes complete sense. I almost think that, I mean, keeping these without UVB is probably going to cause some type of issue down the road. And that would end up being an issue. We wouldn't know what it is. It's I just came in and they were dead one day. You know, it's one of those stories where
that would probably be a difference maker. Yeah. Okay. So we've kind of established the backbone of husbandry, but obviously you've provided them this ability to get their physiology up to where it needs to be. We got the UVB going, naturalistic enclosure. So you've set the stage for them to be them. So what do they do that sets them apart behaviorally compared to other snakes that you've kept?
They are very communal. I wish that I had more than the two together, because when they were in a larger group, they would choose to be together. They're in this massive enclosure. I mean, they're a small-bodied snake. I mean, they're like 3.5 feet, 200 grams. So they're not this giant snake. So when you put a group of small snakes in a 6 foot by 3 foot enclosure, they look tiny, but and they have all these places. I've got, rocks, which they carve dens under. There's cork flats. There's so many areas to hide in, and they choose to be together.
That's cool.
And I haven't had any issue feeding them together either. Not to say it's never going to happen, but they really seem to work out the communal issues together.
Very cool.
I tell you, and I mentioned this possibly our last episode, maybe the one before, but oh man, your cages are awesome. I mean, the way you go about making your naturalistic setups are just fantastic. And for those that aren't watching this on YouTube, we're talking about the differences in substrate that are so aligned with the species that she's putting in there. And Kayla, you and I have talked before. I know that you go out and collect the different things to really make these naturalistic pieces pop. And if you are seeing this right now, it almost looks like, for me, the closest thing, while the sand doesn't, that this isn't it, but if you live by a river and the way after a flood and it's rescinded and you have all this kind of driftwood that's piled up and it's almost like that, but prettier. But it's that much for these snakes to be able to hide in and choose. And so I don't care whether we call it enrichment. I don't care whether we call it choice, whatever words we want to use there. These snakes freaking have it. I mean, and it's no wonder you're successful with them, with the amount of effort that you go into this enclosure. It has inspired me, and I said that on a recent episode. It has inspired me to want to. I'm not even going to try to mimic that stuff, Kayla. I am not that creative. But I'm going to do my best to at least give some pine snakes justice, in a cage. Because after seeing what you did with these, it's incredible, absolutely incredible. I'm just sitting here thinking, man, it take you like an hour and a half to find a snake in there. You had to go digging through all these spots. It's that cool. So so big kudos on that.
Thank you.
So this group of snakes, they're members of the family Samnophiidae, which is an African Middle Eastern part of Europe, family. They're known for having secretions that they basically rub on their body, and then they're thought to be lipid based, so fat based. I've read one thing that said that it could be the equivalent to a form of sunscreen or sun protection. It could also, because they're out in these environments where the sun is just blasting them, it could also be a mechanism of kind of covering yourself in pheromones, and you go into the communal setting and oh, that's Pete, based off that. Have you ever seen them do any of the rubbing behavior where they kind of wipe
They
that?
do it like on the daily.
Oh my God.
It's
so
like they wake up and they like re-rub themselves down and then they're ready to start their day.
Yes.
Get up, put my face on.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that when my babies hatched, the babies were like 2 days old and they're doing it.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
wow.
Cool. Yes.
And I haven't noticed any rhyme or reason whether it's like only when it's super hot. They do it in the winter too.
Okay.
That is so neat.
Yeah, actually, the photo that's up right now, she was doing it, and then I tried to get a video, and she stopped, and so I took the photo instead.
Okay. So, and then before we're not talking about food, but what's their feeding response like? Like, is it, we talk about they're moving all the time, but sometimes those snakes that do that, they're, if it's a male, it's like a perfect gentleman taking the food off the tongs. And then you've got false water cobras, which are Shrek on crack. They're just like,
they're not like false water cobras. They're pretty mellow.
Pretty mellow.
They're really cool. They're gonna give me more huff when I'm in there moving them or in their space. Then she'll hood up. And I just throw a handful of mice in, and when they find them, they find them. Usually they're in a specific corner, and I throw it in, and they just do their thing. I used to like sit there, and stare, make sure they're not going to lady then tramp and, try and go after the same rodent. And they haven't had any issues.
Very cool.
So I'm pretty relaxed on their feeding. I just throw a bunch in and walk away. But in the times where I have tried to dangle it, with the tongs, they're more of just like, leave me alone, and they take off to the other side.
They drop feed more. Okay.
Yeah.
And then final behaviors I want to talk before we get into the husbandry is defensive behavior. And obviously, false cobra, they're going to do some kind of neck hooding. And the picture we have up on YouTube right now, if you're watching YouTube, this is a picture that comes from our friend of the show, Ashley Dezen. Did I do that right?
Ashley from Canada.
Ashley from Canada. There we go. Northern Lights. But we stole this from you, but we're giving you credit. But it's a great picture of them hooding, and obviously Ashley keeps them the way that you do based off the pic. But what, you mentioned that like they want to eat you. So what is the defensive behaviors like when they're at temperature?
I think it depends on individual personality. My male is pretty relaxed. He will hood if I'm like poking him with the hook or like really irritating him. But and they all came in the same shipment, so it's not about being in captivity longer than one or the other. My female, I walk in the room and she hoods. So visually, I mean, she'll see me from 10 foot away and start hooding. So it's more of they just get pissed off. And, and she'll strike at you.
Oh, sorry about that. She will strike at you?
Yes. Yeah. She holds her ground and strikes. Wow. So if I'm ever going to get bit, which fingers crossed, knocks on wood that I'm not going to, but it would be from her.
Is there like a size difference between the males and females in this species?
I don't believe so.
It's
not in the pair that I have. I can tell the difference strictly because of her personality, but they're the same size.
I think what's messing with me on these and why I asked that and where my brain keeps going every time I look at them, I'm getting a very garter snake with spice vibe from these. And it just seems like because they're so active, they seem to be so intelligent from what's being described. And, just the communal piece, that all of this really is reminding me of garter behaviors and, some of the things that they're doing, or at least that level of intelligence, in interaction. So that's why I'm like, that's where that question came from, is because how similar I'm seeing so much of this.
My pair are the exact same size.
Gotcha.
Right. And then we're going to bounce to husbandry right after this last question, but I want to talk about because you haven't been bitten, but you obviously do your research, so you are aware of the bite. Tell us what you found out, not through personal experience, thank goodness.
Yeah.
But what is a bite from one of these animals supposedly like?
Well, I treat them like cots. I don't reach in, even if I'm digging around trying to find eggs or filling their water up. I'm not reaching in barehanded, and I certainly don't handle them. And there are people out there on some of the Facebook groups where they're like, "Oh, look at my danger noodle," and I'm like, "No, don't do that. Don't hold it." And so a lot of people, I would say, a large majority of the people that are keeping these are keeping them incorrectly. They're keeping them too cold. So there has not been that many people talking about being bitten because their animal is cold and sluggish. And if they were to keep them warm, you'd probably see more people talking about being bitten. I talked to April Linkfield. She had gotten bit, and she said it was not a fun day. There was fever, body aches, vomiting, diarrhea, the whole shebang. For like a solid 24 hours, you were hating life. And so I don't want to experience that.
No.
And I don't blame you. And actually, I was going to say April Linkfield's the only other person I know that's really that's worked with these. And she said that exact same thing, that those who show off handling them, it's more than likely they're too cold is why they're not taking a hit. And I don't blame you one bit for treating them like they're hots.
Because they are hot.
Well, I mean, like they're full blown. Because I'll admit this. I told Zach this just the other day. When it comes to the false water cobras, I am a sissy. I am still. Anytime one of them comes back and's getting a little angry, I'm like, okay, we're done, because I just don't want to take a bite. I don't want to find out. You know what I mean? And so I completely. Kudos to you for working with them in the first place. Because I mean, I've heard the same things, that it can be a pretty gnarly, bite, and that truthfully, just treat them like they are full blown hot. I mean,
and as the false water cobra guy, I do want to say this: there are people who think these are false water cobras, which is always crazy to me. If you're kind of paying attention in some of the false water groups on social media, about once every 2-3 months, you'll get I just got my first false water cobra, and it's one of these. And luckily, I've said this before and I'll say it again, I like those groups. They're usually non-hostile, and they're good for beginners. But in those instances, there's an awful lot of, you don't know what you have and you probably should get rid of that discussion with the false water cobra keepers. This is about as distantly related. This thing's more closely related to a mamba than it is a false water cobra. And a false water cobra is more closely related to a corn snake than it is to this. So they are very far apart evolutionarily in the grand scheme of things. So, okay. So we've done behaviors, natural history. Now let's move on to husbandry beyond the general setup. So obviously we're keeping them hot. And when it comes to feeding them, what's the primary forage? And then how often are you actually feeding them?
In the wild, they are primarily lizard eaters, lizard and rodents. And I have not offered mine lizards just because I don't have a steady supply of them. I've heard that they love quail. Mine won't touch them. I've tried. So they get rodents. And because of that, they are prone to obesity. And especially if their bodies are, used to lizards, which are not as fatty as rodents. So I don't feed that often. You would think a colubroid that is, this active, constantly moving, this warm, is burning all their calories, that they need to be fed more often. I don't do that. I feed every 10 to 14 days, and small items. Multiple small items. I don't do big meals.
Interesting.
You know, you mentioned something there that I guess I want to pause on it and bring it, because this is something that's been a discussion when really working with the guys who are taking care of the animals here, that paying attention to what the animal's body is telling you. You know, we talk about the behaviors of the animals and how little things like, you know, if you've got back heat on a rack and they're pressed up against the front, it's probably too warm. If they're always in the back, it's probably too cold. Where they'll just kind of tell you, you know, some of the things that you need to tweak and dial in. But you can't just do a one size fits all. No. Whether that's a, you know, I feed every Tuesday, everything. That doesn't always work. Or, you know, if you're doing it, for example, Great Banded Kings, you know, we were feeding every week, and it's primarily mice. Well, I go back there and I notice I'm starting to get some fatty deposits on a couple of these, you know, putting on too much. So let's get more quail in the mix, you know, or let's reduce the number of feedings. Because to your point, Kayla, like, you know, the alternative are going to be more lizard feeders, just like these false cobras. And then after so long, so many months, I go in, I'm like, these are a little bit underweight. Yeah. So it's like, okay, guys, you know, just, you have to look at the snake, you know, and if you feel that you need to adjust up, down, whatever, do it, you know. And so
we share an existence, Clint, because I do the exact same things at the university. We, you know, and I love this discussion. This is an important discussion as a colubrid keeper. Too often people just get in this every Sunday rodent, every Sunday rodent, every Sunday rodent. And over the summer, you know, we were with the Florida Kings that we had, we were feeding them kind of heavy right during ovulation period. So it was small rat, give them a small rat once a week because of the energy allocation for the eggs. And then they laid eggs, give them a small rat to build it back up. But we kept giving them small rats. And then I went and checked in on my breeders in August and damn near died because all of them had hips. Like, not one, and I mean thick. Like, like, oh God. So you know, and these are some really rare localities. So yeah, they didn't eat from like August to October. But I was looking at them every other freaking day, because once they got to a certain body condition, I had to get food on back into them because I didn't want them to do what you just said, retract too much. Now we can't get through the winter. Like, so yeah no. Well, so and I with these guys, the 14 days, that's crazy.
Yeah,
based off you watching them.
I was going to add, I had the same thing happen, kind of the reverse, and this is with Ox, and you know, him continuing to learn back there, and you know, while he has all the tricks to get him to eat, he's done, you know, so much. He's not fully gone through a baby to juvenile, to subadult, and you know, raised them that, you know, that long. And so just, I think it was yesterday or day before, it was yesterday. I had noticed some of our holdbacks should be bigger than what they are. They don't look unhealthy, but I'm like, okay, I want to see what we're feeding here. And it's okay. Go ahead and feed what you'd feed. You should be feeding 2 of those. You know, it should be double that. No, it shouldn't have a fuzzy. That guy's on a hopper or a small adult mouse at this point. You know, little things like that where, you know, newer keepers they haven't gone through that process, you know, to learn. So sorry, didn't mean to go on that tangent, but as soon as you said that, I'm like, it just seems like a great kind of teaching point, you know, out there is just learn the snakes, you know, and sometimes you pay attention to their behaviors, pay attention to their bodies. We should probably do the same for ourselves. You know, what's your body telling you should change? You know.
So, what you know, figuring out that you feed them every 14 days. You mentioned that you drop feed them? Are they the 2 that obviously made it through the importation process are established, and they ultimately became your breeders? Do they eat readily? Like when you offer food, do they always eat?
Yeah, they always eat. Always.
Okay, cool. That's important to me in a snake because
the only time I've had them refuse is if the prey item is too big.
Okay.
And I would like to believe that it's that they don't open their mouth big enough to eat the bigger ones, because I've had the same thing with the babies is, they hatch out at a 2-gram snake. They were tiny, and I struggled to find even the fresh straight out of the womb red pinks that, they were still too big. They would try, and they couldn't get him down.
Crazy.
So
Wow.
they don't want big items.
All right. So food, check. In the cage, the substrate, because we all know Zac's love affair with dirt. And I saw some pretty sexy dirt in those cages.
You're right.
So what kind of, substrate wise, are you just using like paver sand, play sand, or is there a mix in there?
It's a mix. So it is clay sand and decomposed granite. And then in June, when I was back down in Southern California herping, they have like that great, it was like a granite sand, very similar to decomposed granite that I.
Did you bring dirt back too?
Yes, I did. I was like, wait, hold on, I need buckets. So I brought home dirt.
I have mad respect for that as someone who's done this multiple times.
I told you, she goes out and collects this stuff, man, and makes it awesome.
It's like the perfect consistency, because anytime I give them fresh water, again, I don't ever see them drink it, but I just pour. I have a moist corner, just to check all my boxes. I don't know if they use it. I don't know if they need it, but I'm doing it anyways. And I'll dump the water dish out into that corner, and it holds it. Instead of with the play sand, it just kind of it doesn't hold burrows either. It's too loose.
Like I said, Kelly, my grad student, she's looked at all kinds of substrates and dirts and sand from Home Depot and Lowe's, and then the pet industry sand or reptile industry sand from Zoomed and Exo-terra. And I can say that not all dirt is created equal, and not all sand is created equal, and some of it is absolutely better than others. So when you put the soil in, obviously that's a key component, and then you have your rocks and your cork bark flats and tubes and sticks and such. But with the actual sand, is the sand itself cover? Like, are they actually down in the sand digging, or is it more they're interacting on the surface of the sand?
They're on the surface
and going underneath.
So they're not like you think of like a sand boa where they're under the substrate. They're not under the substrate, but they move the sand around where they create their dens. So whether it's under rocks or in with a hide or a cork flat or whatever, they are redecorating their house. They're doing what they want. So forget trying to make it nice, because they're gonna destroy it. And they move the sand away with their neck and create their dens.
You have a video.
Video of it literally digging out under a rock to make its den. I mean, it's really cool.
Yeah, and they do that all the time. Like, they just decide, I don't want this here anymore. So they keep busy, which is awesome. That's one of the main reasons why I like working with the species, is because they're so entertaining.
Wow, that's so
Very
cool. So, Kayla, where did you get the idea for your setup? Did you do research on, where they're naturally from? What made you go in that direction other than just knowing they like it hot?
This is going to make me sound dumb, but no, I didn't do research.
Curious.
No, one, my mom is very much into Egypt. She does tours in Egypt, and self-proclaimed Egyptologist. So, I told her, hey, I'm looking at these species. Have you ever seen them? And she's like, yeah, I've seen them all the time. But that's about as far as that went. And so, no, I did not look up the natural history, or I should have, but it was just kind of like, okay, cool. I'm making a desert scene, and I live in the boonies on property. So I went and got a bunch of rocks, and all the grass that you see in there is literally, I just plucked it out of the field and threw it in there and just tried to make it natural looking.
Okay, cool.
Did a great job on it.
Thank you.
So you build this. Oh, go ahead, Clint.
I was going to, I was going to move to a different topic. So if you're still on the husbandry, you go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So I want to know how you bred them.
That's where I was going.
Perfect. Because were you the first? Is that right? Am I understanding that correctly?
I'm not going to take credit for being the first, but I'm the first to document
it. And
there we go.
Very important.
Yes.
So that's, I mean, put it this way, you're obviously doing something that everybody else isn't. And it really cool to have this new species. So I want to hear what that looked like, how it worked, what you did, and what results came about.
So we'll go back to the beginning. When I was shopping for these, I was going at it where I want to achieve captive breeding them. It was more of like a goal that I set for myself. So when I was shopping, I contacted a bunch of people and were like, hey, have these ever been probed? And most people think you want probed animals. When you buy from anyone, you want your animal sexed. I did not want them sexed because this genus, or the Samophis, am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
Their hemipenes are tiny, like tiny, tiny, tiny little corkscrew. And so when you probe them, you blow through their pockets and sterilize the animal. And so with you, they cannot be popped, they cannot be probed. And so I went through quite a few people, and they're all just like the importer, exporter, wholesaler deal. And they're like, yeah, I probed them, they're a pair. And I'm like, okay, next. And I finally found someone who was like, no, but I'm about to. I'm like, no, don't. Like, don't touch them. And that's why I got a big group of them. And it was, so the way to sex them is don't probe them, don't pop them. You can send in a shed and have
which
them
we recommend
DNA
with our sponsor.
Absolutely.
Yes, that is the easiest way. That is absolutely the easiest way. Or you can, and you have to be patient with this, but the males will shed their hemipenes, but they have to be a mature male, and they don't do it every shed. So you kind of have to be patient and wait.
Same. Not gonna lie, sounds painful.
Yes.
But yeah, so on the shed, when they do it on the shed at the vent, you can see these little tiny little hair structures, and I get so many people sending me photos of their sheds. Is this a male? Is this a female? I'm like, how big is your animal? Is it mature? And how many sheds have you looked at? Because you may have to wait a year, because it doesn't always happen. Intermittently, and if they're done growing, they're not going to be shedding that often. And also, these things, when they shed, you don't know. They don't go blue. They're just, they shed.
Yeah. Really? I didn't know. I didn't know that either.
I'll talk back about the babies. I'll revisit the shedding thing with them. But so I ended up with a pair by chance, and they were breeding in the hottest part of the year, when my ambient room temperature was incredibly hot. And so their cage was very, very warm. So I believe that the temperature is what triggered it. Because I'm like, okay, this is getting hot. Like, I'm worried about him. And then I saw the breeding behavior, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe that's what they want. And the male definitely does his little twitchy dance and everything. And they bred, also, they don't, because of their hemipenes being so tiny, they don't wrap the tail like most colubrids do. They lay completely side by side, and their tail are just parallel to each other.
That's crazy.
And they did that several times a day for a long time. They would stay like locked for a long time, and they were not shy about it. I mean, I got video and photos of it, because I could be right up in their business, and they didn't care. They were not secretive. And
question, how long after you had them did they breed? Like, how long did it take them to get established enough that they were,
maybe 6 months? Not that long.
Man.
Yeah, wow. Really not that long. Because, well, let's see, now I have to do the math in my head. I got them in September of last year.
Okay.
And then so yeah, they were breeding midsummer.
But still went through like a winter cycle, your season and
Yeah, but I
everything.
didn't.
So
I mean, other than my ambient house temperatures dropping, I didn't turn off lights. I didn't change anything. Like right now, they are a little cooler because my house is colder, but I didn't change the timer or I didn't purposely alter anything. So now I'm curious. It'll be an experiment on whether they're going to breed at the same time of the year again. So I guess I'll have more information then. But they're from start to finish is very quickly. They started breeding, and then on day 45, I had eggs.
Man,
wow,
yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah,
and that's what I had talked to a few people in the UK that had worked with another Malpolan species, and he had the same thing of like it's very quickly. And
could you tell she was gravid? Did she look like she was carrying?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
You could like count the eggs. She was so fat.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yep. And that's how I noticed is because I was like, okay, any day now. And then one morning she's out basking. I'm like, ooh, you're a little thin. And
so did she dig out a nest? I mean, because we saw what they were doing earlier. No,
I mean she laid.
They do all that just to crawl under there, but when she's laying her eggs, she's like, screw it.
I mean, I think Max has a photo of where she laid her eggs. But she laid them under cork flat. And I just lifted up the flat and they're all there. And they're not clumped together, they're loose, but she didn't try and cover them up. It wasn't in the moist area of the cage. So she did put them together under cork flat, but it was not where I thought she was going to lay them.
What month was it that she laid? Do you remember?
June, early June.
June.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So we get eggs. Now what?
So I didn't really have much information to go on. There's those people that say that they've bred them, and I'm asking all these questions because I overthink everything. And I was asking like, what did you incubate at? What did you incubate in? And no one could give me any answers. And so I just kind of was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna figure this out. So I did incubate in a Tupperware container, and it was just on sand, regular dry sand. Like the sand that they were laid on is what they incubated in. And so I did not add extra humidity or anything like that. And the other species closely related to them was at, day 55 is usually when they incubated. And I did at 82 because my incubator had other things in it that needed 82.
Okay.
And I think now maybe like during the process, I was like, oh, maybe I should have incubated them a little warmer, like 83, 84. And maybe next time around, I'll bump them up a little bit.
Okay.
Because everyone was like, oh, day 55. And day 55 came and went. And then I'm starting to get worried. And then day 75 came and went. And I'm getting even more worried. And the eggs are still looking great. They're not discolored. They're not dented, and I was like, I was losing hope. Like I was like, okay, this is not going to work. And about day 85, I was like, okay, I'm sacrificing one in the name of science. And I cut it. And it was almost fully developed baby. And it was alive. And I was like, oh no, okay, go back in there. Like,
may have done that before.
Yeah, and that one did not survive. And then day 95 came. I think actually it was like it was day 92. Day 92 came, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna cut another one. Maybe probably shouldn't have done that. And cut it, and it was alive. And I like did the tiny little slit in the egg and then like was poking it. So I didn't take it out of the egg or anything. I was just poking it, and I was looking for movement, nothing. And I was like, God damn it, they're dead. And I had some incubation errors with other of my Honduran clutches at the same time. So I was like really over paranoid and just thinking like, okay, this was not going to work. And so I will admit, like, I made some judgment calls. And again, I learned through this. But I hooked the baby and pulled it out thinking it was dead. And then I got the slightest little movement and I'm like, no. So I killed 2 of them. But I learned. And then, and then 3 days later, they all started hatching. And it was funny is because I was on the phone with my best friend at the time, and I'm like telling him, okay, it's not going to work. This isn't, I failed, I don't know what's happening. And and as I'm saying this, I just spent 10 minutes on the phone with him telling him how upset that I was that they were not hatching and that I killed 2 of them and I don't know where I went wrong. I looked in the incubator and then they're hatched. And it was just one of the moments I was like, oh my God, they're out. And they sat, if for those on YouTube and are looking at the photo, they sat with their, like a third of their body out of the egg. They all hatched that way and just stayed there. And it's the tiniest, tightest little slit in the egg. They didn't do the typical like Lamprey-Peltis where they slit a bunch of slits and then they stick their nose out and sit there with the bubbles. These guys, the tiniest little slit to where I'm like, they're going to get stuck because that slit is so tight around their body. And then they just sat there and I was like,
oh no, Kayla froze.
Did I freeze?
Oh, you're back.
You're back now.
Okay.
Yeah. You just sat there, and we were like on bated breath, by the way.
So I sat there and just let them do their thing because I was like, I'm not gonna mess with them anymore. Nature can take its course.
Third strike, I'm out on this one.
Yeah, exactly. And because I was worried that she was getting stuck, that they were getting stuck in the egg, but they sat like that with their neck and head out for a day, like usual, and then they were all out and I had 6 that hatched and 1 that was infertile. And even the infertile egg, the egg never discolored or sank in or looked like a slug. There was no veins in it.
I wonder if that would have partially been, because correct me if I'm wrong, you said you didn't add anything to the sand, right? Mm-hmm. So I wonder if it never looked bad because it didn't have the humidity.
Maybe.
Because everything we're typically incubating, and kudos to you for not adding anything, because every bone in my body would have been screaming to add humidity to this. You know what I mean? It goes back to just what you're used to. But I wonder if that's why they didn't really discolor, didn't go bad, is they just didn't have the humidity to kind of deteriorate them and break down like the others do.
And what happened like a day or 2 after this happened?
So, and then I had to leave. I had to leave to go to Colubrid Fest.
There you go.
And it was like a day before I was flying out that they had left the egg. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. I didn't think that they were going to actually hatch. So I was not prepared. And then they hatched and then I had to leave. And it was like a parent leaving their baby for the first time. I was worried. And so I set them up, and these things were tiny. I mean, they
look tiny.
They were tiny. They were like 2 grams at hatching. Wow. And I put them all together. And I had a few people who were like, oh no, you should separate them. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to make a judgment call based on the behaviors of the parents. I'm going to keep them together. And I put them all in like a 5-gallon tank that I had. And I was like, well, I'm not going to be here. I don't want to give them too much space because, then they're going to get stressed out. And I didn't want too much clutter in the enclosure because they're tiny and I didn't want them to get squished. And I also didn't want to overheat them. especially being in such a small enclosure. So I was like, so I settled at like 90 degrees on that hot spot. So where that rock, they're basking at 90 there. And
they look so freaking cool.
And then I left, and I was like, okay, they're on their own. And by the time I got back, which was 4 or 5 days, they had shed. And then over the course of the few weeks after that, I've raised the basking temperature a little bit at a time to try and find, okay, they're basking for too long, and then versus they're not basking enough.
Reading the behaviors.
Yep, reading the behaviors. And the 3 and then because I kept them together and I wanted to document their feeding and their weights and everything, I used fingernail polish and color coordinated them. And then, so I have a horrible time with my mice, and they only wanted to eat live. And even the tiniest little newborn mice here are not small enough for them. And in California, see, my go-to says try African soft furs because they have smaller pinks.
Yeah.
And they're African.
Yeah.
But California can't have those. So yeah, you can't have those in California. And so I'm stuck with regular mice pinks. And 3 are now eating. Oh, okay, let me go backwards. 2 ate right off the bat on live pinks, and I tried scenting. It didn't work. Sorry. And the scenting did not work at all. I prepared with an arsenal. I had quail and fish and gecko and skink, and I did have African soft fur scent. Frog, toad, I bought the whole arsenal of scents, and they don't care about any of them. They just wanted live. And that makes sense because they're so visually orientated that they probably just wanted the movement. And with about half the babies, especially the slightly smaller ones, I had to assist feed tails, and they were a breeze to do that. I mean, as soon as you got the tail in its mouth, they would suck it down. It was not the fight when, I'm used to, assist feeding tails to baby kings or whatnot, and they fight you. These were like, oh, okay, it's in my mouth, I'm going to eat it now. But I struggled with, I think, the consistency of it to where it just wasn't enough nutrition. They lasted, so long getting tails, and then I would move up to legs, like hopper legs, and thinking, okay, they're getting some more meat in this, and I just don't think it was enough to
sustain them.
To sustain them. So I did lose 3 over the course of time, and now I'm left with 3, and those ones are a breeze. I weighed them today. I weigh them at every feeding before offering them food.
Nice.
And I'm feeding them every Monday. So they are waiting. It's not the typical feed your babies every 3-4 days. They are, and mostly that's because I don't have an access to pinkies. But every Monday I weigh them, and then I feed. And Blue they all started at 2 grams. Blue today. So mid to end September. So how old would that make them? 4 months?
4 months.
Okay, so they went from 2 grams. Blue is 14 grams today.
Holy heck.
Wow.
Yeah. Huge growth rate. And then pink is 10 grams, and then the green is 8 grams. And Blue is definitely the alpha when it comes to eating. I do have to watch them because he, she, whatever, it will go and steal the pinkies. And there's times where right now he eats 2 to 3 each feeding. And if he'll try and steal a fourth, and I'm like, you physically cannot fit this in your body.
You
You're
little
going
sausage.
to explode. Literally, there's no room in there. And he'll still eat it.
I have a question about when they bite these pinkies, and they have this, the Duvernoy's secretions. Does it? Do the pinkies last long, or do they?
They die fairly quickly. They die fairly quickly, and they discolor really quickly.
Whoa!
Like starting to digest, I guess.
Yeah, they turn that gray color, and especially when I was having issues with getting them started, they would bite the pink and then get halfway down it and then have to spit it back up because it was too big for them. And then you can see where their fangs hit, and it was the bruising of where their fangs were.
Yeah, no, I don't want to get bit by one. Man,
it's really
okay.
Neat.
So now, are you of the opinion, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? We're just going to ride this wave, or do you have some kind of plan to change? Because at some point, if you maintain the same husbandry, they're going to go to a bigger cage with more.
Yeah. So now, I should. So when I got back from Colubrid Fest, I moved them from the 5-gallon into an 18 by 18 Exo-terra style. So they went into a bigger enclosure pretty quickly, and I increased the basking temperatures at that point. Now they're basking at 105 or so. And I have them on the mini chip because they do bury themselves. They do stay under the substrate, and I didn't want the weight of sand on a 2-gram snake. So I stuck them on the mini flake, and then I just haven't moved them off of that because they do just really tunnel and burrow in it. Eventually I will put them in sand.
Cool.
So, Zach had just asked about changing anything up as far as for this season. I think, is it the only thing you're going to do different is your temperatures on your eggs? Because I remember you saying you're going to bump that up a little bit. Possibly.
I want to see. That's where I always believed that if you incubate lower and slower, you get bigger babies. But then Zach had said in a prior episode that wasn't a thing. So now I don't know.
Well,
I would think lower and slower would give me bigger babies, which would increase my odds of getting them to eat something.
So we're going to do a real quick thing. And it's going to piss a lot of people off. So if you made it 2 hours and 1 minute in, I'm sorry for what I'm going to do, but I just want us
remember all the good times.
Remember all the good times. I understand this idea, lower and slower. All right, let me back that up. There was a real long time as a science guy hearing people say that, where I went, what the hell are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. It's a contained system. And then we did the experiment. And then at Colubrid Fest, I don't remember who it was, but somebody threw this, what I'm about to say, out there. And I was like, okay, maybe I could see that. Where we talk about them being the babies being bigger because they're in the egg longer. And I don't remember who it was, and I wish I could, but my brain is fried after the past 5 days. But the idea was they're in there, and since they're in there longer, they're metabolizing the yolk longer, which means they're getting more nourishment out of it. And that kind of makes sense, but there's a fatal flaw. Fatal flaw to that, which is they're ectotherms. If they're colder, their metabolism's slower. If they're warmer, their metabolism's faster. And when your metabolism's faster, you're able to digest, in theory, more efficiently. But if you're too warm, you can kind of rip through it. And your assimilation energy, that's what we call that, taking the yolk and making it you thing, or assimilation efficiency, sorry. I could see that maybe getting out of whack, but I just don't understand the biology and the thermodynamics. I don't think we've ever said thermodynamics on this podcast before, by the way. So I really feel like I need my like glasses and pocket protector. But I just don't understand the logic here, because biologically speaking, if they're colder, they're not metabolizing as efficient as they could. The experiment that we did, where we kept them at 2 different temperatures, and we kept falsies, king snakes, bull snakes, corn snakes, hognose snakes. What was really interesting is I was wrong, but everybody else was wrong too, because we kept them at 77 degrees and 82, 83 degrees, which were kind of the 77 was the most common cold temp. 82 was the most common warm temp I heard for temperate colubrids. And what we actually saw was no significant difference in size. When we weighed them, when we did morphometric, so shape, and we did weight. And for most of the animals, we didn't see any significant difference. But we did see with corn snakes were the one cohort where we did see that the colder animals were significantly larger, which then took my hypothesis and punted it out the building. But it was also 1 out of 5 species. So ever since this experiment, I've been like, I haven't stopped thinking about it, but it's not published, and I probably said too much because that particular graduate student still needs to write their thesis. But I've been waiting I believe I started talking about this when Matt was the co-host, so it's been a while. So anywho, but yeah, no. So, if it were me, I understand the bigger deal, and we'll end this rant with this. This is what I thought was really interesting. The warmer eggs, we lost more. Why do you think we lost more? Any idea? Mold. It was warmer, and the bacteria in the mold had a better living environment, and so we just had Pseudomonas, which is the bacteria. That's that weird salt, like one of the funky smells when you open your incubator tub. And sometimes, like, I can't remember if it's the blue crud or if it's the pink crud. It's one of the 2 cruds. When we incubated at 77 degrees, our success rate was higher because we just simply didn't lose as many eggs. But we didn't really see that big a difference between the 2 temperatures, with the exception of corn snakes.
Yeah.
So
I will say, and this is, I am not science brained, and my brain doesn't think of all the things.
I think you're more science brained than you think.
Maybe, but so I did temp gun where she laid the eggs, and that was like 86, 87. And at the time, there was a cooler area in the enclosure where she could have laid her eggs that would have been closer to matching my incubator temperature. And she chose not to. And so now that I'm thinking back at it, it's like maybe the incubator should match where she chose to lay her eggs. But I don't know if that's just because she liked that cover more, if that's where she was at, or if it was chosen based on temperature.
I was actually going to say that exact thing, that, while I didn't know what the temp was where she laid them, it just seems that for me, logically, the temperatures that they like, the temperatures that they're typically in and around in their environment, I would think that the eggs in nature are probably incubating just slightly higher than that. And if you're going to adjust it, I like 2 degrees, I'd start
2 degrees.
You know what I mean? Try that. And over the course of 95 days, my guess is it, drops off 10 to 15 days on that count, with that 2 degrees. But I wouldn't, when with such, one, you had success, and we don't want to forget that you already had success with it. So if you're going to change it, I wouldn't do a whole lot of, big swing, just a little bit, see how it goes. But my gut is telling me that it's probably just a hair higher is where the magic number is with them, based off of everything else that you have described, and what you find with them. So,
yeah, and I agree with that.
Yeah.
Other than that, I'm not going to cut my eggs. I'm going to be a moldy.
Just let them go.
Yep.
You and Lucas Lee is famous for cutting his black-headed python eggs too early and literally having
well,
them
and it's
die.
like I don't like
Sorry, Lucas.
the controversy. There's the controversy of don't cut your eggs. And I'm not for cutting eggs, and I don't do that with anything else. But with these, I
think it was okay.
What's going on inside?
95 days. It's hard to not think that they're just gone. I don't blame you one bit on that one. So
no, 100% on. I mean, who the hell else are you going to talk to find out if that's too long?
Yeah,
exactly.
Right. I don't know.
So, all righty. Well, we pretty much covered the bulk of it. They're obviously still going, and we're going to want updates. Any final thoughts that you want to provide the listeners on this species? Like, kind of the take-home message?
I think the trick is just setting them up in big hot spaces.
Okay.
And keeping them together, because if you're introducing them like you would kings or whatever, I don't think you're going to see anything. I think they need to establish the den sites and choosing where they want to be, and because they do den together, they're always together.
Another pro cohab conversation.
Yep, there you go.
I mean, we keep hearing them over and over.
Yeah, and I cohab majority of my stuff.
Yeah.
And I want to do something else, because I know it seems like we're wrapping up, and we are wrapping up, but I'm fairly positive. I don't know for sure, but since it was like 1 year ago when we did the Honduran episode, I think that we asked you, so where do you think herpetoculture is going? And I want to ask that question again, because since we asked you that question, in 1 year, I feel like a lot has happened in the colubrid world.
Yeah.
I know my perspective of herpetoculture, and I do think it's because we now have Colubrid Fest and it's got some traction. And I think it's because the colubrids, like in the past year, Clint's shown it. He's literally shown data that colubrids are kind of, we're seeing the upsurge and the ball pythons are declining. Not that that's bad, but it's good for us. Let's just call a spade. But any thoughts on herpetoculture today and where it's going?
Yeah, I think people are starting to get more on the bandwagon of naturalistic keeping, and they are accepting that things are not black and white, that you can do bioactive. You don't have to cook your wood first. And the same thing with the cohabbing. It's being more acceptable now. And people are getting into the more unusual oddball stuff. And more people are trying to establish the projects, which is good, because I don't think that our borders are going to be open. We're not going to be getting the imports in forever. And at some point, what we have in here is what we're going to end up with. And that's why I'm trying to do what I can it's a challenge too, of getting the snakes that are not really being captive bred to be captive bred, and getting the F1s and the F2s and so forth, because if something happens and I lose my breeders, there's the whole project. Like I have to keep back these babies and raise them up, and so there's a lot of end game in it. But as far as the community, I think we're just going to keep going down the rabbit hole of colubrids are awesome. And their behaviors are so much more rewarding than, I dare I say it, a ball python.
There are just so many flavors. I mean, you can.
All righty.
Good deal. Good episode. Good talk.
Excellent. And thank you for coming on. And we certainly support what you're doing.
Absolutely. You're not sick of me yet?
No, thank you so much for hanging out with us out there, Pomona. It was a blast.
Yeah. It was great.
Yes. And I mean, karaoke night was fantastic.
Sushi, the best sushi ever.
Yes, it was.
All righty. So if people want to reach out to you about Hondurans or talk to you about, mole snakes or false cobras, mad cats, mad hogs, how do they go about doing that?
I am mostly on Facebook and Instagram under Infrared Reptiles or Kayla Martin, and I'm also on Morph Market.
There we go. Okay. Clint?
You can find us at Metazotics.com. You can email me at metazotics@gmail.com, or you can find me personally on Facebook, Clint Bartley. You can also check out our Metazotics Facebook page or on Instagram, MetazoticsLLC.
Boom. And to find the podcast, you can, how do you interact with it? If you're listening to this, you can go to YouTube and see our ugly faces. Kayla's isn't ugly. Clint and I, I don't even know where this is going. Ending that. It's late. We also have, Colubrid and ColubridRadio.com, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Correct.
So check out the website. We never really plug the website, but it's fun. The origin stories there. There's bios for Clint and I, and then we have our episodes present. And our tech wizard Max is responsible for keeping that upgraded for y'all. He does a wonderful job. So thank you, Max. We also have our Facebook page. We're slowly but surely getting the Instagram page back up again and running. If you love the show, consider joining our Patreon page. That would do nothing but help us expand and go to places, which then we now know directly leads to future guests and us meeting people that listen to the podcast. And we met several listeners while we were out in Pomona, and that just inspires us to keep doing what we're doing, because when we do these interviews, it's 3 people in a room, and we don't realize the volume of people that are consuming this. So there's that. And then to reach me, Dr. Crawdad on Instagram, Zac Loughman on Facebook. You got show ideas, send them to me. You've got potential people, send them to me. I want to point out, John Rice was given to us by a listener, and now I'm writing a book with him. So, there's like proof in the pudding that these relationships just kind of help CCR, help us, help the Colubrid community. So please do that. And then finally, we want to thank Morelia Python Radio Network for hosting us. We are proud members of the network, and listen to some of the other shows, Carpets and Coffee. I'm actually going to be on Reptile Fight Club. I'm recording an episode tomorrow night. Rob and Justin told me what the subject was, and I forget what it was. So I'm just going to show up, and we're going to see what I'm fighting about. Well, all I know is Rob said something to the effect of, Justin and I really have a beef to pick with you, and it had to deal with taxonomy. So this should be a good one. So listen to that one when it comes out. Morelia Python Radio as well. So be it morning, afternoon, evening, or night, whatever time of day it is, have a good one, and we will catch you on the next episode of Colubrid and Colubrid Radio.